Hello, I'm novelist Laura Shero, and what follows is an hour-long conversation with Indigenous Canadian Métis Ryan Bellerose. He is a longtime ally, fierce ally to Israel and to the Jewish people in the diaspora. Our conversation was lively, and we had significant differences of opinion, which we voiced with clarity. I hope you enjoy. If you like this conversation, please make a comment and please subscribe to my channel. It's entirely free. Thank you. Hello, I'm Laura Shero, and I'm here with Ryan Bellerose. He is a Canadian Indigenous Métis, and he has some opinions about Israel and the Jewish people, which are really interesting. The first time I introduced myself to Ryan was to ask him if he would be interested in getting this little statue that my parents have had since I was born, actually. My parents and he is going to take charge of this little statue. I'm going to be sending it to him. This is a piece of pottery from the Blackfoot tribe, and my parents had heard about. My parents were blacklisted during the McCarthy witch hunt, and they heard about. They read an article in a paper about the Blackfoot people needing help through a really brutal winter, and they sent some money to them. And within a week or two or three, they received this. And this has been in my family since 1948 or 1949, something like that. And it's time to send it back to the Blackfoot people. So that's how I first introduced myself to Ryan. Um, but we're here to talk about other things. Among them, the indigenous nature of the Israeli people, which you started talking about in a short clip that we did. But please continue what you were saying.
Yeah, well, it's my assertion, and I think it's backed by all the empirical evidence that the Israeli experiment, the return of the Jews to Israel is basically the world's first successful decolonization and land back movement, right? It started in the 1800s with the return of Jews that had been exiled, and there were always Jews. Like, this is the part I think that gets left out, right? There were always Jews still living in the land. The land was never free of Jews. Like, they, even though they had been basically had a genocide conducted against them, and
Yep.
the vast majority had been kicked out and exiled, you still had Jews that stayed, right? Mostly in places like Sfat, Tiberias, places that were off the beaten path, right? And then in the 1800s, you had basically a return, and you had a lot of Jews in communities like in Jerusalem. Jerusalem, people don't know this, but under the Ottoman Empire, Jerusalem had become basically a majority Jewish again,
Yeah,
right?
I
Because
had.
it is the most sacred place in the world for
Yep.
Jews.
Yep.
So so it's the idea, like, it's strange to me that I'm seeing like so-called indigenous rights activists saying stuff like, basically in support of Arab colonialism, because they just don't seem to understand that not all colonizers came from Europe.
Why do you think that is? Hold, I'm going to pause this for a second. Sorry. Okay. So you were talking about uh, the victimhood of the Jews have somehow been assigned.
Yeah. And that they've internalized like kind of the wrong lesson for that, right? Because like, okay, so on the one hand, right, you guys are basically maligned for not fighting back. It's like you said earlier when you were talking about your mom, right? On the liberal, like on the left kind of leaning side of this, you see this a lot. You see them where they say stuff like, well, the Holocaust only happened because Jews didn't fight back and blah, blah, blah. But they ignore like so much of the context, right? Because the Jews actually did fight back. A large number of the partisan groups in Europe were Jewish, or
Yes.
they had extreme amounts of Jewish participation, right? And I'm not just talking just about like the Bielskis. There were tons of Jewish heroes of the resistances. And this is something that we don't talk about. And it's weird to me that we don't talk about it. But then when you understand that a lot of the left-leaning Jewish community, what they don't really understand is that if you rely on a bully, if you rely on the bully's conscience to stop bullying you, you might as well resign yourself to being bullied the rest of your life. Like bullies only stop when you make them stop.
When you do what? Say it again.
When you make them.
Yeah.
A bully will only stop bullying you when you make it. Like, and that's where, like, the Hollywood bullshit with, oh, well, the bully, he's bullying the kid, and then the kid stands up to the bully and he punches the bully in the face, and then the bully is like, oh, I'm gonna go bully someone else now because it's easier. No, in real life, what'll happen is the bully will double down because he can't afford for other people to see that kid stand up to him, because then they'll stand up to him, and then he'll lose all of his power, right? So what really happens is the bully will double down, try harder to bully you, and probably just be even more vicious. But now that this is the thing, that's when if you stand up to him, then he's going to realize, okay, the diminishing returns on this are not worth it, right? And that's when he'll usually leave you alone. But it's this idea that it's going to be some sort of instantaneous thing. It never is. Like it's always a process.
So, would that be one of the reasons? I mean, I have my own theory about an understanding of the reasons why Israel, basically the day that they became a legal sovereign state in 1948, either that day or the very next day, 5 Arab countries, Muslim Arab countries, invaded them. Would that,
Absolutely. Yeah. This is in a macro sense, absolutely. Because think about it. If you're the colonizer, so you've conquered and colonized the entire Middle East, most of North Africa, and a large swath of Europe, right? And then over the centuries, various different caliphates come to ascendance, right? So it wasn't always, people forget this. The Arab conquest happened in the 7th century. But then after the Arab conquest, there were a bunch of different caliphates, and the Arabs were not always the ascendant in those caliphates. And the last caliphate was actually the Ottoman Turks, and the Ottoman Turks didn't like the Arabs, right? So
of
Arabs
course
went
they
from
didn't.
being the top, yeah, they went from being the top dog to being just like everybody else, right? Maybe they were a little bit above the Christians and the Jews because they were Muslim, but if you take a look, the Fellahin were poor people. They were tenant farmers, right? So the rich Ottoman Turks are the ones that owned all the land, and they were rich, and they lived in places like Damascus and Beirut, which were like the top end places to live in at that time. But the average Arab was just a tenant farmer, right? So now all of a sudden you have these Jews. The Arabs could always say, well, I might be a tenant farmer. I might have a really shitty life. I might be oppressed, but at least I'm not a Jew. At least I'm not a Christian. I mean, look at how shitty they have it. They have it even worse than us. And then all of a sudden, this group of people that you've basically been conditioned to believe that you're better than, suddenly they're declaring independence in the country that you've lived in now for 1,300 years. And you're like, what the hell? Wait a minute. I remember when I was the boss. I remember when we built a mosque on top of your Temple Mount, and there was nothing you could do about it. And now you're in charge? Wait a minute. I don't like this. Right? That's what really happened. And then all of a sudden the Arabs all get together and they're like, you know what? We don't really want to have the Jews have their own country. So here's what we're going to do. We're all going to get together and we're basically going to and this is their exact words, by the way, we're going to push the Jews into the sea, and then we'll split the land up amongst ourselves, right? There was no talk of building a Palestinian nation for the Palestinians because at that time, Palestinian meant Jew.
Yeah. You know, I I'm gonna be talking in a week or two with a guy who was born in Palestine in 1948 or 46. He on his birth certificate, he's a Palestinian, and
Yeah.
he's the one of the leaders of the Glasgow Friends of Israel. And that's how he
Oh,
introduces himself to people. I'm a Palestinian born man, and I'm a friend of Israel. I'm
yeah.
looking
Listen,
forward, yeah,
that'll be cool. But I don't know. To me, I always laugh because it's like people forget that the British mandate for Palestine, not the British mandate of Palestine. It was called the British Mandate for Palestine.
right.
And it was literally an agreement that was made between the British and the League of Nations. And it basically they created what's like a protectorate. And the whole point of it, if you read the request, it says to help reconstitute the Jewish national home.
Yeah,
The whole point of the British Mandate for Palestine was to help create Israel. So like, by the way, that's why all this crap about international law and Israel being illegal, it's not true. This is all based, like this all comes from British common law. British common law comes from a concept called a priori, which means priority. What came first? The British Mandate for Palestine was literally an agreement that said we're going to reconstitute the Jewish national home.
and what does the
So
word
the only thing that
Palestine
was illegal was the creation of Jordan. Sorry.
was the creation
Yeah.
of?
The creation of Jordan was completely illegal according to international law because the British carved out 70% of the mandate and just created a state for a group of people. By the way, that Jordan was not created for the Palestinians, it was created for the Hashemite kingdom, who come from the Hijaz, which is in Saudi Arabia.
I didn't
So
know
yeah, I
that.
mean, if like I don't understand why we don't talk about this stuff more.
Well, why do you think we don't talk
Yeah.
about it more?
Well, because it blows up all the narratives,
Anti-Semitism?
right? Like if you actually start talking, yeah, well, it's I think there's anti-Semitism involved there, but I also think too that part of the problem is that the people on our side, they don't do a lot of deep research. Like if somebody comes to me and says, Ryan, I believe that your people's struggle is illegal, I'm gonna ask them, okay, on what basis do you believe that? And then I'm gonna go and do some research, and I'm gonna make damn sure that there's no way that they can out argue me. I'm going to make sure that because knowledge is power, especially in these kinds of situations. If I was to lie to you right now about something and you had no knowledge about it, you would not be prepared to refute those lies. But
That's
if you have a deep and abiding knowledge of the subject and I try to lie to you, you're going to not just call out the lie, but you're going to be able to refute it.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that's why, like I keep trying to tell people, like there's two things at the center of this conflict, right? And surprisingly enough, it's not anti-Semitism. It's a deep and profound ignorance, right? Because I'm not really overly concerned about the Jew haters. There have always been Jew haters. They are vile people, but they rely on ignorance. And what they do is they rely on the ignorance of normal people, because what they'll do is they'll tell normal people, well, yeah, like this is what the Jews did. They showed up and the Palestinians, they stole the Palestinians' houses. The Palestinians welcomed them and they let them into their homes. None of that happened, right? But if you don't know that,
That's
if you
what
don't,
I grew up believing.
yeah.
I grew up
And if
believing
you,
the Nakba.
yeah, well, that's exactly it, right? Like if you don't, it's right now, okay, so a modern example of this, we talked a little bit about this offline, is this starvation narrative in Gaza, right?
Yeah,
This is emblematic of what I'm just talking about, right? So we are supposed to believe that the people in Gaza are all starving to death. I believe words like imminent danger of starvation. We've stage 5 famine. Like they use all these technical terms to get everybody all worked up, right? Meanwhile, I have a friend that called and ordered a fucking pizza from Gaza.
but yeah.
She made a video of herself calling a Gaza pizza joint and getting a pizza delivered,
I'd like to get my hands
right?
on that
Like
video so I can put it on my page.
absolutely. I'll send it to you after. And there's also there's a group called Gazawood, right? And what they've been doing is they've been going on Palestinian social media. And because here's the thing, me telling you this, I mean, I could say this and I could be lying. I could be just lying with a straight face and making this shit up. But if you actually go to Palestinian social media, right, they themselves are showing videos of their weddings. They themselves are showing videos of them hanging out at a restaurant called Nutella.
This is
And
in
that
Gaza.
restaurant looks like a pretty good restaurant. This
This
is
is
in Gaza.
Gaza.
In Gaza as we speak,
As we
right?
speak, today is
As we speak.
what, the 14th of
Yeah.
September.
Yeah, you can go on. This is the craziest part about all of this. They're talking about how people are starving to death, and then they'll post a video with fat people complaining that they don't have enough to eat. Like, and I don't mean like, mildly chubby. I mean, I'm 6'4" and I'm 350 pounds, right? But I'm not claiming to be starving to death. These people have been claiming to be starving to death for over like 5 years now. They've been saying it.
Right.
And now it's really been ramped up into overdrive. So this is the thing. It's craziness. And people are believing it because why? Because there's so many social media accounts that are pushing that.
All right. I need to back up in my head a minute. You said something that clicked with me, and I'll just take me a moment to get it back. I think, look, I'm in a 12-step program, and I used to have a sponsor who was a gay man, a very progressive gay man. And I told him sometime in the last year and a half, that I was really traumatized by what happened October 7th, October 8th, the gas, the Jews screaming across the Western world in all the major cities, beginning October 8th. And his response to me was, well, I care about the Palestinians. And I fired him immediately. And I privately said, fuck you. I'm going to have to cut that out, I have a feeling. But
Good for you.
yeah, but I might have to cut out that one word. I think, and I told him he was an anti-Semite, because that's what Ryan, that's what I believe people are, who are faced with all the evidence, still are crying about the starving Palestinians in Gaza. That's what Greta Thunberg is, and the rest of her crew, when they turned their backs on the movie, on what was it, 45, 47 minutes, showing the raping and murder of human beings who happen to be Jewish. They turned their backs around, in their chairs around, so they didn't have to look at the film. To me,
Yeah, but you know why they did that. You know why they did that, though.
Anti-Semitism, in my opinion. Why do you think?
That's the easy answer, but the harder answer is that somebody beat them. Somebody beat us to them. They're salted earth at this point. So like, so say I'm trying to convince you of something, right? So you and I just meet, and I want to convince you to come around to my point of view about something, right? Would you say it's easier to convince you to come around to my point of view if someone hasn't already talked to you about it and kind of pushed their idea?
Yeah.
Right? There's a psychological thing. It's called first past the post, right? So whoever gets their argument out into the ether first usually wins. It doesn't matter how good the argument is. It doesn't matter how moral or ethical the argument is. The simple truth is that they got their side of the story out first. And we are constantly playing catch up. So for the last 65 years, we've been hearing about how the poor, pitiful Palestinians are the most oppressed people in the history of the world. The poor, pitiful Palestinians have the mean old Jews doing mean things to them all the time. And instead of fighting that narrative, we had people on our side of the fence saying, well, let's just try to see from their side of things. Let's try to put ourselves in their shoes. Let's try to understand them. When what you should have been saying is, murdering children is wrong, right? So now what have they done? They've projected what they have always done to you onto you. So now if I bring up the fact that the Mayalot school massacre, where they massacred little girls who were actually on an overnight trip at a school in Ma'alot, right? If I bring that up, you know what they say to me? But look at how many times the Jews have murdered Palestinian children, right?
Right, I've heard
Why?
that.
Because first past the post. They got that story out into the ether. So now I'm telling them about something that happened in 1980, right? And they're going to tell me, well, no, but look at how many times. Like we could bring that up. We could bring up the Sbarro pizzeria, but what do they say? Well, yeah, but look at Israel bombing kids in Gaza, right? Because what they've done now is they've basically salted the earth. Now, these people who probably some of them were normally decent human beings, but now they hate you so much because they have been literally infected with this virus. And so it doesn't matter what we say to them now. I keep trying to tell people, all my friends on TikTok that are doing advocacy, stop trying to appeal to their better nature because that's a failing strategy. Because the simple
No,
truth is when it comes to Jews now, they hate you. There's
absolutely.
nothing you're going to say that's going to change that.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely a
So like,
failing strategy.
yeah, yeah, like getting them to watch. Listen, if we would have got people to watch 47 minutes 3 or 4 days after October 7th, we may have reached a few more people. But by that point, because we're literally talking, October 7th happened, October 8th, they were already talking about, conducting Israel conducting a genocide.
Yeah, I know.
So like this is the thing. This was all planned. And look, for your viewers, there's a guy named Yuri Bezmenov, and he literally writes about this. He was a part of the KGB, and he explained how they were going to destroy the West. And basically, it's all through subversion. What do? You erode the confidence in the institutions, you erode the confidence in the social contract. You basically teach people that it's okay to use extremely violent rhetoric. And the next thing you know, you have people being demonized. And then you have stuff like with Charlie Kirk, right? You call Charlie a Nazi. Well, then it's okay to kill Nazis, right?
It's
I
okay
mean,
to kill us
anybody
because
who
we are all Nazis. We are
exactly,
all
right?
Nazis.
And the sickest part about that is that you're Jews. You were the victims of the Nazis. You were literally the reason for the most evil regime in the history of the world is because they wanted to destroy your people. And now the spiritual successors of those people who still want to destroy your people are calling you those people. And what happens? Eventually, you lay down with dogs long enough, you get fleas. And unfortunately, we're struggling with that right now. We've got people who genuinely believe that the Jews are now the new Nazis.
Okay, so I agree with you. For the most part, I agree with you. What do you do? I agree. We don't
Yeah,
do any more of this bullshit. Please be nice to me. I'm Jewish. Please be
yeah.
nice. I'm sorry for all the bad things that Israelis have done. I'm so sorry. I never did that anyway, but a lot of Jews did. I think a lot of Jews are finally learning that that just doesn't work. So what do you do? How do you turn around? How do you turn around the narrative? How do you turn around first of all, the press is
There's, yeah,
lying about us
yeah,
everywhere.
yep.
Do you know a major news source that isn't lying? You probably do.
It's really, yeah, it's tough. Like the only news source that I've ever seen that I have yet to see have anything really bad about Israel was One America News. And they're like a fringe news source. They're not a mainstream. So yeah, you want to know the truth? What do? We have to start being aggressive, right? I'm not saying we have to lie like they do. I'm not saying we have to like, basically just constantly try to flip emotional switches because that's what they do. But we have to learn how to be better storytellers. We have to convince the Israelis to do something that they really don't want to do, which is acknowledge the absolutely horrific shit that the Palestinians have done because you need to get it out there. And I know that there's this idea that we have to protect the families of the victims. I get that. But when you take that too far, you end up with, okay, I'm going to give you an example. Munich, 1972, right? They take Israeli athletes hostage. Almost everybody knows about that. Almost everybody knows that Palestinian terrorists kidnapped Israeli athletes. What they don't know is that they castrated a bunch of them. What they don't know is that they sexually tortured them for hours. Why don't they know that? Because the Israelis didn't want that information public because they were worried that surviving family members would see it and, be traumatized.
I
So
mean,
now
they would
for
be
20,
traumatized. They would be
well, of course
traumatized.
they would, but you know what? Now you have to ask yourself, unfortunately, is the traumatization of a few people worth getting the actual facts out to people? Because I'll tell you this, for how many years did we hear about Palestinian freedom fighters? And how many years did we hear about, well, they're just resisting oppression? People that are resisting oppression don't castrate people.
I believed that. I believed all of
Yeah.
that
Well, of
nonsense
course
because
you did.
I come from the left. I still consider myself a leftist.
Yeah.
And I believed it. I just want to back up just for a moment. You were talking about we were talking about the press.
Yeah.
What is your opinion about the Haaretz news?
The Haaretz should be defunded. Haaretz should be completely removed from Israel. It might be it's not even tabloid journalism. It's not, it's editorialism. And they actually ran a story once about me that was a complete fabrication. I was in Hebron for a weekend, and some woman saw me wrestling with some little kids, and she literally wrote a story about how a Canadian was attacked by the settler youth. Like, this is how absolutely ridiculous those people are. So yeah, I think that part of the problem with this struggle is that we have mainstream media, some of whom are quote unquote Jewish, and they tell the most lies about Israel. Like Haaretz is absolutely vile.
Well, there were always sellouts. There were
Yeah,
sellouts in the camps, in the concentration camps.
yeah. But we're like what a lot of people don't seem to understand is we're at a crossroads here, right? And like I ascribe to the tipping point theory of history, which means like, history can go one way or the other. And in a large number of places, there's like what we call a tipping point. So things could go one way or the other. We're at a tipping point right now. And I think that if we don't fight back more intelligently, and if we don't find ways to actually reach people before they get radicalized, if we don't find a way to tell the story of the Jewish people and the story of Israel to people before they get inundated with all of this garbage and bullshit, we will lose
How
and we will see another Holocaust.
do you do that with such a small population? I mean, basically, what are we? 9 million people on the planet? Maybe it's more,
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
14 or 15 million at this point.
Yep. So you start with fighting smarter, not harder, right?
You
That
do what? Can you repeat
you
that?
you, st- you start with fighting smarter, not harder, right? Like, listen, the simple truth is that if we were to put your IQs, like, and people hate when I bring this up, but it's true, it's an objective truth. There's a significant number of really smart Jewish people,
Yeah.
right? If we put them on the problem, they will find a solution. That's what comes from being really smart and being intellectually flexible. You figure shit out. The problem is that we have a ton of really, really smart people, but they're working on other things, and we need to start prioritizing this. Like, you can't tell me that there aren't an absolutely staggering number of super intelligent people doing advocacy on behalf of Israel, but most of us aren't getting paid. Most of us have no resources. So you have this conundrum. You have the people with the ability and the passion, but not the resources. And then the people that have the resources don't have the ability and the passion. There has to be a way to combine those two things. And if once we start doing that, we start winning in spades.
Okay. What about the
But then how
Koran?
do you do it? What's that? Sorry.
No. What about the Koran? The Koran, what is it, 1400-year-old document,
Yeah.
which is basically not, I didn't know this until recently, is not a bunch of stories, the way it is in the Talmud, the Torah, and the New Testament. It's a series of commandments and instructions. And 123 of those instructions, commandments, punishable very severely, are to try to force Islam on whatever population that is not are not Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, but start with the Jews. And if you cannot convert them, force them, convert them, trick them, con them, then you kill them. 123 separate verses in the Quran, which kids are hearing about by the time they're 5 years old in Muslim countries. How do you deal with that?
So the first thing you do is you have to realize that you're not going to win if you just try to fight them like on a man-for-man basis, right?
Yes.
That's the first thing you have to realize. So the second thing you realize is you have to find allies within that community who want to push for a more moderate version of Islam, right? And they do exist. And they're becoming, it's funny, they are becoming a louder voice. I wouldn't say by any stretch that they're even remotely close to achieving a majority. But I would say that people like Amjad Taha, Mossab Youssef, there are Muslims out there who realize, wait a second, it's better for us as human beings to be able to work with Israel than to be part of a forever war, right? And so what you do is you say, okay, so how do we replicate those people? How do we amplify their voices? But more importantly, and I think this is the big thing, is this is going to sound like a little bit extreme, but how do we make sure that people understand that Islam is a dangerous ideology and that it is a problematic ideology, and yet at the same time not alienate the Muslim people that actually want to see it get an enlightenment, right? People forget Christianity before the Enlightenment was a violent religion.
Yeah, I know.
Like it was St. Ambrose of Milan. St. Ambrose of Milan was asked, well, you want us to destroy that whole city, but the city is half Christian. Like we'll kill the heretics, but like we don't want to kill the whole city. So Ambrose literally said, just kill them all. God will know his own. Right? Like that was Christianity at the time. Christianity was a violent ass religion. But now, after the Enlightenment, a lot of Christians realize, wait a minute, if the teachings of Jesus are to be peaceful and loving, perhaps unaliving everybody that disagrees with us, even on small points of contention, isn't really following the teachings. Now, the issue is with Islam that unaliving people for disagreeing is part of the teachings. So now that's an extra degree of difficulty.
All right, so Mossab Youssef is no longer a Muslim.
Yeah.
He's a Christian. Yeah. He has been a Christian for a long time.
Yeah. But he was raised Muslim.
He was raised Muslim, and he was raised by a father who was one of the founders of Hamas. Here's what he says. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali says the same thing. He doesn't, well, actually, I don't know if Ayaan says that, but I've seen Mossab say it. He doesn't trust any person who calls himself a Muslim because they may be, if they haven't disowned, yeah. Do you know that if basically they are trained to be friendly, to be nice, to do whatever they have to do to ingratiate themselves into a culture they are basically sleeper cells. So his position, the position of the son of the founder of Hamas, is he doesn't trust anyone unless they have disowned the religion publicly or privately. And what I've heard people say is And I think there's a lot of truth. There may be, who do you know who's telling the truth? In other words, there may be people who fall in the category that you talk about, Muslims who would like to see an enlightenment. Ayan or Hirsi Ali says an enlightenment is impossible because of the way the Quran is written. But that's her opinion. I'd have, I don't
Yeah.
understand completely why, but I listen closely to what she has to say. But what do you say? How do you deter? Oh, here's what someone said to me, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. Even if there are a lot of Muslims who are want to disassociate, leave the religion, want to see an enlightenment, they are much too afraid of basically being executed for taking that position um, publicly with people, so that everyone knows about it. Um, and the fear is legitimate. How do you know who's telling you the truth and who's lying?
You don't.
That's right.
So when I was growing up, like it's funny because I don't really like this story, but it's an important story. Uh, there was a little while where I really didn't like white people. I know it's kind of funny coming from somebody with pale skin, but like my experience with white people had been that they would smile, and then as soon as you weren't there, they would say really, really horrible shit about you. And like the funny part was because I have pale skin, I would see it a lot firsthand. Like they would smile and talk about how, oh yeah, I don't see skin color and I love Indians, blah blah blah. And then the native person would leave the room and they would see me and think I was a white person, so they felt comfortable, saying what they really thought in front of me, not realizing who I am. And so I went to my grandmother and I said to her, I said, "Oh, grandma, I'm so fed up with white people. Fuck, I hate white people. Why do I hate them so much?" And my grandma looked at me and she said, your mom's white. And I was like, no, she's not. Right. And my grandma was like, Ryan, your mom is Norwegian and French. And I was like, well, yeah, but she's not like those other white people. Right. And my grandmother, for like an hour, she just, basically talked sense into me. She said, you have to understand that, white people don't see the world the same way we see it because they have different lives, they have different experiences. They have everything that the lens that they see the world through is completely different from yours. And so you just have to understand that because once you understand that they might not necessarily have the same values, they might not necessarily have the same things that they want or desire, then you'll understand that that's just who they are. And you can't try to force them to be like you because you'll always be disappointed.
Right.
And she was 100% right.
Yes.
Right. So what I learned was that what I do is I judge people on an individual basis, right? Because the reality is judging people according to groups. If I judged every Jewish person by my experience working for B'nai B'rith, I would be an anti-Semite for real. But I don't. Why? Because I've had so many Jewish people that I genuinely care about that I've met that are wonderful people that have literally made a vast difference in my life that I would never judge them by the worst of like what I perceive to be the worst of their community, right? The issue with the Islamists is that they'll kill you, right? Like they are like they're violent. They will actually try to cut your head off. This is a thing. So, but I've also had Muslim friends who were genuinely kind and compassionate people. And I don't believe that it was all some deep taqiyya plot. What I believe is that every community, doesn't matter what community, they will have good people in that community. Now, are they always the strongest voice? No. And are they always the voice that is ascendant? No. But if there's a way that I could help platform those people or amplify their voice, then I will try. And now it's interesting what you said, though. And I think this is the key, right? The key to all of this. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but all I can do is what I believe in. So if I meet somebody that I think is a genuine person, and I've been on this planet for 50 years, I've made a ton of mistakes. I've trusted people I never should have trusted. I didn't trust people that I should have trusted. And now the lesson that I've learned is that I have to do my absolute level best to find the good in somebody, to maybe try to reach a part of them. And if I can't reach it, that doesn't mean I should stop trying. It means that I should try another way. So,
Uh, it's a lot to take in that you said. Um, what I have said to people recently, and Jews that trust me and who I trust, I have said, and some of them haven't really liked my saying this, and some have listened. If you have a friend or friends who say they are Muslim, ask them about those 123 verses. Ask them
yep.
if they agree or if they know about it, because if they've read the Quran, they will know. Ask them how they feel about those verses. Are they for killing all Jews who don't convert? That's, for me, I don't know if that's the final test, but that's a test that employ at this point. If I
Yeah.
were faced with that, as it is, quite honestly, I won't do that on a one-to-one basis anymore. Since I've started this YouTube channel, I have been getting death threats. And I have
Yeah.
jihadists who have subscribed to my channel. I don't know how many. I only know of one or two because I only find out about the ones who also have a channel themselves.
Yeah.
Um, so I make the choice not to talk to them individually if they call themselves Muslims. Um, but I
Well,
will,
you have a slightly different you have a slightly different thing than me, right? First off, you're a woman,
that's right.
right? Now you've made a choice to basically put yourself in the crosshairs by being you're not anonymous, you're using your actual face, right?
I'm not
There,
using
there's
my
you have to
real
remember
name.
there's
I'm not using my real
yeah,
name.
yeah. So like there's like you are in a different kind of space than a lot of people that are doing advocacy. There's people on TikTok that don't use their real name, they don't use their real face, they don't use their real voice because they're worried about stuff like that.
Mhm.
The issue is really you just have to be cognizant of your own security and safety at all times, right? Because you're a woman. I mean, look at me. I'm not a small dude, right? I can walk anywhere I want and I don't feel unsafe, right? Is that always smart? No, because the reality is we just saw it doesn't matter how big you are. If somebody really wants to unalive you, they will.
I was going to just say that you had talked about how when you were a kid or a younger person, people would be nice to you to your face, but behind your back, they would say vicious, racist stuff about you. I don't, my maiden name is not a Jewish name, and I don't look Semitic. My mother did, my grandmother did, my grandfather did, but I don't. And I regularly, and especially because I didn't have um, a Jewish last name, um, I heard disgusting shit, racist,
Oh, I believe it.
anti-Semitic shit everywhere, not just as a kid, but in workplaces. And I actually changed my name um, legally about 15, 20 years ago uh, to honor my Jewish grandmother. I took her maiden name. Um, but I'm not telling you anything that you won't probably admit to, or maybe you won't admit to it. I don't know, because you're a guy. But it really hurt hearing all that racism.
Oh yeah,
And it was
yeah.
continuous.
I'll tell you that. Yeah, it's constant. Listen, I'm not going to pretend that it didn't hurt. I had a girl dump me in high school and she found out my dad was an Indian. And her exact words were, "You lied to me. Why didn't you tell me you're an Indian?" And I was like, I don't hide it. Like everybody that knows me knows I used to jibber jabber about being Métis because it's an important part of my identity. But she literally, her exact words, like she said, I don't think we can date anymore. And I said, what are you talking about? Because I thought we had a great relationship. And then she said, you lied to me. And I said, I've never lied to you. What are you talking about? And she said, when your dad showed up at my house and he was the Indian, you never told me your dad was an Indian. And I was like, I just assumed you knew. Like, I was in shock. And yeah, it hurt. That all that stuff hurts. Listen, there's nothing I can say to you that's going to make you feel better about the fact that there are people who genuinely hate you. And they don't hate you for any rational reason. Like it's not like you did something to them. It's not because like let's be honest, there are good reasons to hate people. And if you did something to me or my family, there's a something really really bad or evil, there's a good chance I'm going to hate you. But if you are just guilty of being a Jew and I'm just guilty of being an Indian and somebody hates us just for that, yeah, it kind of bugs me. It hurts. It sucks. Doesn't make any sense.
One of the things that one of the things that moved me about you and the indigenous people from all over the world who have taken this path of being pro-Israel, calling themselves Zionists, is that my hunch is that all of you have suffered genocide. And so when you talked about indigeneity, which isn't a word that I've ever used before, that we are indigenous to Samaria and Judea and basically what Israel is today, I was really stunned and moved by it. I didn't know that people like you existed. I didn't know until a year ago.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
we're not the loudest voice, right? Because unfortunately, the loudest voices in the Native community and the people that most people see are like the lefty, the activist types,
right,
right? And
right.
the funny part is people like me, we're probably the silent majority, right? Like I have a good friend. Her name's Lonnie, and she's on TikTok and Instagram, Lani Anpo, right? If you don't follow her, you really should. Absolutely brilliant woman, right? This woman is incredibly brilliant. And she gets so much flack from the Native community, right? They will say things to her that they never said to me. And these are the same people that I've been adversarial with for over 25 years.
Yeah,
But they will say things to her that are absolutely vile. And she's much more visibly Native than I am. Like when you look at her, she looks like a Disney princess of a Native woman. Like that's what like she literally looks like a Pixar Disney princess. And now they'll say to her, you're not even really an Indian. They never say shit like that to me, right? But it's because she's a woman.
and
And they go after her in a different way.
these are Indians who are saying this to her, or white
Yeah,
people?
native
Oh,
native, native people
Native
and
people.
the yeah. So there's also the white liberal saviors. We call them Captain Savaho. They're like they're the ones that show up and say the most ridiculously racist stuff, but they feel like, well, I'm a liberal and I'm super virtuous, so I'm allowed to use the N-word. I'm allowed to say really vile things to Indians because, I'm so virtuous that I'm allowed. I get a pass. And they will say things to her like, so she did this report recently, a brilliant, brilliant piece of literature. I'm hoping it gets released soon, debunking the entirety of I guess it's like critical race theory, right? She's debunking all of that stuff. Patrick Wolf with his settler colonialism bullshit.
Yes,
She's debunking it, and it's
good.
very well written. It's very well researched. And rather than engaging with the content, they are trying to go after her personally now because they can't engage with her arguments, right?
They
And
can't. We know.
because she's an attractive young woman,
Yeah.
they attack her physically. Like it's absolutely insane and vile to me that Native people would do stuff like that. Like they say, "Oh, you're not even really an Indian," and then one of them knows her uncle. They live on the same reservation as her uncle does. And they have the nerve to say, well, you're not even really his niece. Like, you haven't lived here in a long time. It's like, you just admitted that that's her uncle, you garbage person. Like, why would you do that? And listen, I don't want to tell her story. She can tell her own story
No.
10 times better than I can. But I just want people to know, like, listen, we are out here. There are native people that see through the bullshit, done the reading, done the research, and we're not going to fall for this nonsense.
Thank you. My battery seems to be running out, but thank you for taking some time with me, Ryan.
Ready?
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All righty. You have yourself a good day, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.